He invited the maid to play chess as a joke. 5 moves later, no one was laughing. You ever seen a man so rich he forgets what it means to be decent? That was Gregory Alton, CEO of Alton Cloud Systems. Man had built an empire off data storage and enterprise software, but forgot how to look people in the eye unless they were holding a golf club or wearing a Rolex. It was the first weekend of December just outside of Flagstaff, Arizona, the annual executive retreat. The kind of thing where people in tailored jackets pretend to enjoy fireplace talks and team-building games while their minds are on bonuses and board meetings. Gregory didn't do casual. Even his relaxed weekends were performances, an excuse to flex his money and remind everyone who the alpha was. This year, he rented out a sprawling 4-acre estate with 7 bedrooms, a wine cellar, and a chessboard carved from marble and oak that sat dead center in the main hall like a shrine. The guests, top executives, their spouses, a few partners from LA, arrived Friday night. The catering staff was flown in from Dallas. The servers wore tuxedos. The maids, quiet, uniformed, invisible, or at least that's how Gregory saw them. Camille R. Bennett had been hired last minute through a private staffing agency. 51 years old, soft-spoken, steady. She moved through the house like clockwork, folding towels and clearing dishes without a sound. Nobody asked her name. Nobody looked her in the eye, except for one woman, Janice Harper, VP of Marketing, who complimented Camille's efficiency and offered a half smile when she passed by with hors d'oeuvres. But even that felt more like politeness than anything real. By Saturday evening, the crowd had loosened up. Bourbon poured into glasses. Laughter grew louder. Gregory stood in the middle of the living room with a tumbler of scotch and that signature smirk on his face. The conversation had shifted to strategy games and leadership. Business is like chess, he declared. Every move should make the other person sweat. People nodded, chuckled. Of course they did. Gregory walked over to the chessboard, spinning one of the knights between his fingers. Anyone want to try their luck? He asked, eyes sweeping the room like a lion scanning a herd. No one moved. He turned then, just enough to catch Camille crossing through the hall with a tray of clean wine glasses. You, he said, loud enough to cut through every conversation. Camille froze mid-step. Gregory grinned. You ever play chess? She paused, looked at him, then at the board. A little, she said quietly. Oh, come on now, he chuckled. Don't be shy. Let's see what the help can do. A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the room. Someone coughed. Janice Harper's face twitched, unsure if she should laugh or leave. Camille looked at the guests, then back at Gregory, her lips pressed together in a firm line. She walked over, gently set the tray down on a side table, and wiped her hands on her apron. Sure, she said, her voice steady. If you want to play, I'll play. Gregory clapped his hands like a game show host. That's the spirit. He yanked out the chair across from him and gestured with an exaggerated bow. The guests circled in like vultures. One guy even pulled out his phone to record. Gregory moved first, aggressive, fast, like he was swatting flies instead of playing chess. Camille didn't rush. She sat back in the chair, eyes focused, hands folded under the table like she had all the time in the world. The laughter quieted. Something in her stillness made people stop smiling. But what no one in that room knew was this. Camille Bennett had played this game before, and not just on a board. She'd played it with her life. Camille didn't dress like someone you'd expect to see at a chessboard. Her gray polo was tucked neatly into plain black pants, and her shoes were the kind meant for long shifts, not compliments. Her braids were pinned back simply, but her eyes, sharp, clear, watchful, didn't miss a thing. Gregory leaned forward across the board, cracking his knuckles. Don't worry, he said. I'll go easy. Camille smiled faintly. Please don't. The guests chuckled, some awkwardly, some genuinely. No one knew if she was joking. Gregory didn't like that. He opened with an aggressive king's pawn. Predictable, showy. Camille responded with a quiet defense. Bishop's pawn, slow and calculated. Then she waited, not nervously, patiently, like someone who knew the weight of silence. By the third move, Gregory was narrating. This is called the Italian game. Old school. Classic. They teach it in beginner books. Camille didn't say anything. She just moved her knight, and suddenly the angle shifted. People leaned in closer. Janice whispered to her husband, "She's not guessing. Look at her. She's studying him." Gregory, maybe sensing the shift in energy, cleared his throat and glanced at the crowd. "You know, I once beat a hedge fund manager in 6 moves. Guy never saw it coming." Camille slid her bishop diagonally across the board. A clean, quiet move. "You sure you haven't played before?" Gregory asked, eyes narrowing. "I played a little in college," she said. "Oh yeah? Where?" "Fisk," she replied. That gave a few people pause. Fisk University, historically black college, well known for its academics. "You study there?" Gregory asked, now trying to sound casual. "I did," Camille said. "Computer science. Full ride." Somewhere in the back, someone muttered, "Damn." Gregory blinked. He looked at the board, then at her. "And now you clean houses?" he asked. Camille didn't flinch. "My mother got sick. I left before graduation to take care of her. Never went back." She moved her knight again. Another solid play. Not flashy, not loud, but it cut off Gregory's entire left side. For a second, the room was quiet. He scratched his chin, suddenly unsure of the next move. Camille's voice was calm. "You don't have to do something forever for it to matter." Gregory stared at her. She wasn't being smug. She wasn't performing. She was just telling the truth. For the first time all weekend, nobody in the room said a word. It was like watching something shift in slow motion, one piece at a time. He moved his queen aggressively, trying to reclaim space, but she parried with ease, moved a pawn. Simple, precise. "You trap yourself when you don't respect the board," she said quietly. That hit different. Gregory leaned back in his chair, laughing nervously. "You're quoting Sun Tzu now?" Camille looked up, her face unreadable. "No, my uncle taught me that. He worked at a tire shop in Memphis, played chess on milk crates outside the shop during his breaks." There was weight in that statement, more than Gregory knew how to carry. He looked back down at the board. Something was off. The queen was cornered, his rook blocked, his knight pinned down. He leaned in, squinting. "Wait, hold on," he mumbled. Camille didn't move, didn't fidget. She just waited. Janice stepped closer, one hand on her mouth. The CFO, Alan Drake, leaned forward too. No one was checking their phones anymore. Even the servers paused as they walked by. Camille reached forward, moved her rook. Another quiet move, the kind that looked small, until you realized everything behind it. "Check," she said softly. Gregory's eyes widened. The room went dead quiet. But if Gregory thought this was just a lucky break, he was about to learn just how deep Camille's game really went. Gregory stared at the board like it had betrayed him. His fingers hovered over his bishop, then his knight, then back again, like he was trying to force a future that didn't exist. He chuckled under his breath, but there was no humor in it anymore. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. Camille sat still, hands folded in her lap. She wasn't gloating, no smirk, no expression at all, just watching, like she had nothing to prove, because she didn't. Gregory cleared his throat. "All right," he said louder. "You've got some moves. Maybe I underestimated you." A few of the executives chuckled politely, unsure of which side of the joke they were on. "But let's be real," Gregory continued, forcing a grin. "One check doesn't mean much. This game is far from over." Camille nodded slightly. "Of course, take your time." He moved a pawn to block. It was clumsy, too reactive. Camille's eyes flicked over the board. Her hands moved again. "You should have castled," she said simply. Another piece snapped into place. Alan Drake raised an eyebrow. "He's getting boxed in." Gregory shot him a quick look. "It's just a warm-up." But the room wasn't laughing anymore. They were watching. Janice stepped closer. "She's building a trap. Look at the center." Gregory leaned forward, squinting again. He didn't want help, but he needed it. Camille spoke gently. "The board doesn't care who you are, Mr. Alton. It just reflects how you think." The sentence hit like a jab. Not angry, not cruel, just honest. And that's when the joke started to feel like something else, something heavier, because everyone there knew what this really was. Gregory didn't invite Camille to the table out of generosity. He did it to show off, to get a few laughs, maybe embarrass someone who couldn't push back. She was supposed to fumble, to shrink, to remind the room of how high they all sat and how far she was below, but she didn't shrink. She leaned in, and every move reminded them how wrong they were. Wait, Gregory said, holding up a hand. Let's pause for a second. Let's reset. Start fresh. Camille raised an eyebrow. You want to start over? He hesitated. I mean, this was just for fun, right? Nobody's keeping score. Her voice was soft. Only people losing say that. The line wasn't sharp. It wasn't even said with heat. But the room reacted like it had been slapped. Someone near the back muttered, "She's not playing with him, she's playing through him." Gregory swallowed. "All right then," he snapped. "Let's go." Camille moved again. This time, her knight slipped into a position that pinned Gregory's rook between her bishop and queen. Another gasp. "She's closing in," Janice whispered. Gregory's cheeks flushed. He looked up, eyes darting from face to face. These were his people, his lieutenants. He paid their salaries, controlled their futures. But at that moment, none of that power helped him. Because in chess, money doesn't move pieces, only skill does. And Camille had it. I mean, let's be real, Gregory said, trying to laugh it off. She probably grew up playing this on porches somewhere, right? Camille's jaw stiffened. A long silence followed. Then she spoke. No, I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment over a barbershop in Little Rock. We didn't have a porch. We had a coffee table with a broken leg and a hand-me-down board missing 2 pawns. She looked him in the eyes. I replaced them with bottle caps. Still beat my brothers every week. That line wasn't just a clapback. It was a reminder. She didn't learn the game in comfort. She learned it in the gaps, where people like Gregory never had to live. And somehow, in that gap, she built the kind of discipline you couldn't buy. Gregory looked back at the board. He moved his queen to counter, but it was too late. His right side was exposed. Camille leaned forward. Check again, she said. This time, no one spoke. But the more he tried to win, the more it became clear. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was a mirror. And Gregory hated what he saw in it. By the 7th move, something in the room had shifted. You could feel it. No more polite chuckles, no more side-eye smirks. Just silence. Gregory's back stiffened. His fingers tapped the edge of the table. He was used to control, to walking into any room and knowing it was his. But here, in front of this chessboard? Camille had taken that from him without raising her voice or breaking a sweat. He tried to act casual, leaned back, took a sip of scotch. Y'all act like she's Magnus Carlsen or something, he said, forcing a chuckle. Let me breathe. Nobody laughed with him this time. Camille didn't respond. She didn't need to. Her next move, queen to g5, tightened the noose. His remaining knight was trapped. His rook pinned. His king sat in the open like a man with no friends left. She's suffocating his defense, Alan muttered. Janice nodded slowly. She's not rushing. That's what makes it worse. Gregory's eyes scanned the board like a man staring at a deadline he couldn't talk his way out of. He moved a pawn, anything, just to stay alive. But the moment he let it go, Camille's hand moved. She slid her rook to the corner. Double threat, she said. Check in 2. Someone in the room actually said, damn, under their breath. Gregory's jaw tensed. Okay, now you're just showing off. Camille looked up, unbothered. You invited me to play. I'm playing. It wasn't arrogance. It was fact, and it left no space for ego. He gritted his teeth. You trying to prove something? She leaned back, folding her hands. No, just tired of pretending I don't know how to win. Boom. The weight of that line, you could have heard it drop like thunder. Janice turned to Alan, her voice barely above a whisper. She wasn't just playing the board. She was studying him the second he opened his mouth. Gregory tried to recover. He moved his bishop. Camille didn't even flinch. I told you, she said softly. 3 moves. She reached out, calm as ever, and slid her queen forward. Checkmate. Gasps. One of the assistants actually dropped their drink. The room froze, completely still. All eyes on Gregory. All eyes on Camille. Gregory stared at the board. His hand hovered, then dropped. He couldn't deny it. Couldn't fake his way out. Couldn't make a joke big enough to erase the fact that he'd just been outplayed by the very woman he thought he could mock. He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding eye contact with everyone. Camille stood up, not fast, not slow, just deliberate. She adjusted her apron. Then gently, she began putting the pieces back in their places, one by one, silently. Gregory watched her hands, stunned into stillness. You know, he mumbled finally, this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Camille looked at him, really looked at him. I know, she said. That's the problem. Not a threat, not a boast, just the truth. She turned to walk away. Her shoes whispered against the floor. Wait, Janice called after her. Camille stopped. Janice cleared her throat. That was impressive. Camille gave her a small, warm nod. Thank you. Gregory looked down, then muttered, Guess you're more than just a maid. Camille paused, turning her head slightly. I always was, she said. You just didn't see it. But the real checkmate wasn't the move. It was how Camille walked away with her dignity intact, while the room sat there trying to figure out how they'd missed the brilliance sitting right in front of them. Camille left the room like she'd simply done her job. No victory lap, no smirk, no dramatic pause. Just quiet steps down the hallway and back to the kitchen. But the silence she left behind was louder than anything she could have said. Gregory stayed seated at the board, still, elbows on the table, his drink untouched. He stared at the chess pieces as if they'd betrayed him. Someone finally broke the silence. Janice turned to the others. You all saw that, right? That wasn't just a game. Alan nodded slowly. He tried to use her. She didn't just win. She taught him something. Across the room, phones were lowered. Conversations came in hushed tones now, awkward and broken. The power dynamic had flipped without warning, and no one knew how to carry themselves. One of the younger executives, Jason, fresh out of business school, shook his head. I feel like I just watched a movie or something. Like, that didn't feel real. Oh, it was real, Janice said. You just weren't expecting the ending. Gregory finally pushed back from the table. The chair made a hard scrape on the floor. He stood up, exhaling like the wind had been knocked out of him. No words, just the look of someone realizing too late that he wasn't the smartest person in the room. He looked around, met a few eyes, then dropped his gaze again. The guests began to scatter, quietly. Conversations picked back up in low tones, but nothing sounded the same. The mood had cracked. People were watching him now, not because he was the boss, but because they didn't know what to make of what they just saw. In the kitchen, Camille washed a few glasses. Nothing fancy, no ceremony. She stood by the sink like she had for every event she ever worked. Only this time, something felt different, even if she never said a word. Janice stepped in. Camille didn't look up right away, but she felt her presence. Hey, Janice said gently. I hope that didn't make things harder for you. Camille glanced at her, drying her hands with a towel. You mean harder than being mocked in front of 30 people? Janice looked down, embarrassed. Fair. Camille gave a small smile. Not bitter, just knowing. It's all right. I've been invisible in nicer rooms than that. Janice stepped closer. I just want you to know, that was one of the most graceful things I've ever seen. You didn't just beat him. You carried yourself with more class than half the people in that room combined. Camille nodded. Thanks. Janice hesitated, then asked, You ever think about going back, to school, I mean? I used to, Camille said, but sometimes life doesn't give you that kind of space. And then one day you realize everything you had to give, you gave somewhere else. Janice didn't have a response, just respect. Meanwhile, back in the living room, Gregory stood alone by the fireplace. He poured himself another drink, but he didn't touch it. His mind wasn't on the scotch. He looked over at the chessboard, pieces now reset. Camille had done it without being asked. He hadn't said thank you. And now, standing there, he realized he didn't just lose a game. He exposed something ugly, not just to the room, but to himself. He couldn't laugh it off, couldn't spin it. Camille hadn't yelled. She hadn't called him out. She hadn't needed to. Her calm intelligence had done all the talking. He took a deep breath. For the first time in a long time, Gregory Alton felt small. But what lingered in the air wasn't just the memory of the loss. It was the question no one in that room could stop asking themselves. What else have we been blind to, just because we never bothered to look closer? Sunday morning came with the smell of fresh coffee, eggs, and silence. The usual chit-chat over brunch? Gone. People sat around the long oak table, pushing food around their plates, stealing glances at Gregory, who looked like he hadn't slept. Camille moved between the tables, refilling coffee, quiet as always. Same uniform, same steps. But everything felt different, like the room knew now. She didn't need to say a word to hold their attention. Alan broke the quiet. "Hey, Camille, you ever think of coaching chess?" She looked up, mid-pour. "Not really," he chuckled. "You should. I'd sign up in a heartbeat." Gregory sat at the end of the table, watching. He hadn't touched his plate. "Camille," he said suddenly. She turned slightly, waiting. "I owe you an apology," he said. His voice wasn't strong. It was low, heavy. "What I did yesterday wasn't just a bad joke. It was disrespectful. I saw you working, and I thought I was being clever. I wasn't." Camille said nothing, just listened. "I thought bringing you into that game would make people laugh. I didn't expect you to, win," she offered softly. He looked down. "Yeah, that." A few heads turned toward her, waiting for what she'd say, some expecting a clapback, some a speech. But Camille wasn't performing. "You didn't respect the board," she said, "and you didn't respect me. That's what hurt. Not the joke, not even the assumptions, just the fact that I was never meant to be taken seriously." The room held its breath. Gregory swallowed hard. "You're right." He stood up slowly. "And I've got a lot to think about. I spent years convincing myself I see people clearly. Turns out, I've been looking through some of them." Camille gave a small nod. Seeing people clearly starts with looking without judgment. Gregory looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't know how. He just nodded and sat down. The table stayed quiet for a moment longer. Then gradually, conversation returned. Less forced now, softer, more human. After brunch, as the guests began packing up and staff prepared for departure, Janice found Camille in the hallway near the back stairs. "I meant what I said yesterday," Janice told her. "You don't need to play for applause. You already earned something more valuable." Camille raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" "Respect, and not the cheap kind. The kind that changes how people move." Camille smiled at that. "Maybe, but respect is only worth something if it changes behavior." Janice nodded. "Then I hope yesterday sticks." Later, as Camille finished loading towels into a linen cart, she felt someone approach behind her. It was Gregory. He didn't say anything right away, just handed her a folded envelope. She opened it after he left the room. Inside was a handwritten note. "You taught me more in 15 minutes than most consultants have in 15 months. You reminded me that power isn't in how loud you speak, but how well you listen. Thank you for playing the game, and for winning it with grace." Underneath was a check. It had more zeros than she expected. She folded it back into the envelope, tucked it into her apron, and returned to her cart without a word. She'd already won. But Camille's real victory wasn't on the board. It was walking away without needing validation, proving that some people play chess with pieces and others with patience, silence, and truth. The estate emptied out by the afternoon. SUVs rolled down the gravel driveway one after another. Laughter returned, but quieter. Luggage clicked across stone tiles, and the hum of idle conversation filled the gaps where silence had stretched only hours earlier. Camille stayed behind to help close up. She wiped counters, double-checked guest rooms, folded throws in the sitting room. The same work, the same pace, but every now and then someone stopped to thank her. Not out of habit, but because they meant it. As she cleaned the chess table one last time, she paused. Just for a second. The board was reset, the pieces waiting, white and black, equal, until someone makes the first move. She looked at the queen, the same piece she'd used to corner Gregory's king, to undo every smug grin and careless insult. She didn't smile, didn't sigh. She just set the queen upright again, perfectly centered, then turned and walked away. Back in Flagstaff, Gregory sat alone in his office on Monday morning. He didn't tell the story at work, didn't brag, didn't spin it into a clever anecdote. He just sat at his desk, eyes drifting to the framed photo of his executive team, most of whom had been there watching. He opened his laptop, pulled up the company's HR records. After a long pause, he typed, "Create initiative, professional development program for support staff, include tuition reimbursement. Then he opened another tab and searched local chess clubs in Phoenix. Not to win, just to learn. Camille never told anyone what happened at the retreat. She didn't need to. The lesson wasn't in the story. It was in how she carried herself afterward. She still worked, still swept, folded, scrubbed, but the people around her saw her differently now. They didn't just nod in passing. They saw her. And maybe more important, they started seeing each other too. There's something about a chess game that reveals the truth. It strips everything down, takes away titles, takes away wealth, takes away assumptions. In the end, it's just two people, thinking, reacting, planning. And that's the point, isn't it? Life isn't about how loud you speak or how expensive your suit is or how many people clap when you walk into a room. It's about how you move, with discipline, with grace, with integrity. Camille didn't need a degree on the wall to prove she was smart. She didn't need a spotlight to prove she mattered. All she needed was a moment. And when that moment came, she moved, right past the noise, right through the disrespect, and right into the kind of victory that doesn't need to be announced. So here's the question. How do you move when no one's watching? Because the game, it's already on. You just might not know who's sitting across from you yet. If this story made you pause, even just for a second, then carry that with you. Look closer at the people you pass by. Ask yourself if you're really seeing them. And when it's your turn to make a move, do it with humility. Respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn. And sometimes it comes from the quietest voice in the room.